This is part 3 of my Metroid Other M rewrite. If you haven't already seen the last two parts, I would highly encourage you to do so because we will be picking up right where the last part left off. We return to the present just as the lift stops and the door opens. Everyone gets back to business as they step out into the testing grounds, with Keiji taking point. This area looks to be made up of various subsections modeled after different types of terrain, with an observation deck overlooking the whole expanse. The areas in question are a desert, a tundra, and a jungle. Maurice speculates that it's probably designed this way so that they can test new equipment in a variety of environments. Whoever they are. Lyle notes that there's a lot of ground to cover here, though things seem surprisingly quiet compared to other sections of the facility. He suggests that they split off into teams to try and scope out a wider area, and after mulling it over for a bit, Adam agrees. Now, I know that I complained about Adam splitting up the group in the original story before, but in the case of Other M, he literally sent everyone off into the unknown by themselves into completely different sectors after having just fought a giant monster made of bugs, and establishing that communications were going to be faulty. Here, he's splitting the group off into teams in what appears to be a relatively safe environment. Besides, the various testing ranges aren't going to be that far apart, at least not compared to the different areas of the entire station. Lyle is assigned to accompany Maurice into the tundra while James and Keiji inspect the desert. That leaves Samus and Anthony to check out the jungle. Going forward, players will have Anthony as a companion for a little bit. He'll be able to assist Samus with rifle fire, freezing rounds, and maybe we can even give him some grenades to spice things up. No plasma cannon just yet, though. As Samus and Anthony make their way through the jungle, things seem eerily quiet. Then, Samus detects movement. She turns around just in time as a security drone appears to emerge from one of the nearby trees, as though melting out of the wood. Samus and Anthony quickly put it down, but it's not long before more appear. If you haven't guessed it yet, these enemies are equipped with camouflage units that let them blend into the environment. They're visible only just before they start to open fire, so players would need quick reflexes or a keen eye to keep track of their movements. Luckily, Samus has Anthony as an extra pair of eyes to call out incoming attacks, while also providing additional firepower. Together, Anthony and Samus fight their way through the camo drones and the bug masses that will inevitably appear before heading deeper into the jungle. Eventually, the duo come across a small cave, and Samus opts to go in first. As soon as he does, a motion tracker on the ground goes off, sealing off the entrance with an energy barrier. Samus is now trapped inside, and while Anthony seems ready to try to break through with his plasma cannon, Adam stops him and encourages them both to search for another exit. Anthony complies and heads around to see if there are any other openings into the cave, leaving Samus to head deeper in toward the next boss fight. So here we have a boss that I refer to as the Shade Stalker. As the name implies, it blends into the darkness to skulk and ambush Samus. I like to imagine, though, that Anthony manages to find some sort of control room that allows him to periodically turn the lights on throughout the cave. This causes Shade Stalker to appear as a massive black silhouette, making it much easier to keep track of and attack. Every so often, Shade Stalker would cause another blackout, though, forcing players to once again keep their eyes peeled for signs of movements in the shadows. As a reward for being the boss, I was thinking players could receive some sort of sonar ability, like sort of a weaker version of the scan pulse from Samus Returns. This could be useful for finding camouflaged enemies and hidden secrets, though its range might need to be nerfed a bit to compensate for the 3D space players are moving in. Using her new ability, Samus locates a weak section of the cave wall and blasts her way through with a missile. From there, she's able to reunite with Anthony in the aforementioned control room, before the two briefly discuss the creature they just encountered. Using the terminal in front of them, Samus and Anthony manage to pull up some files regarding the Shadestalker, but unfortunately much of the data appears to have been expunged. Anthony tries to contact Maurice in the hopes that he might be able to help, but all he hears is static. Anthony and Samus keep trying to contact the rest of the team, but to no avail. Samus can't even get in touch with Adam anymore. It seems that something is now blocking the signal, forcing the duo to search for the rest of the 7th platoon on foot. Samus and Anthony leave the jungle behind them and cross over into the desert area. They decide that their first order of business is to regroup with James and Keiji. Unfortunately, it's not long before the duo is beset by burrowing machines. On the plus side, Samus's new sonar makes it much easier to keep track of them underground. Yes, I know that's not quite how sonar works, but this is a video game. We can take some creative liberties. Anyways, the enemies are quickly dealt with, but there's still no immediate sign of the other soldiers, and communications are still down. The desert itself looks to be made of sloping dunes and artificial canyons, all of which are fraught with danger. Eventually, though, Samus and Anthony are drawn to the sound of gunfire and follow it to the source. They stumble across James unloading a few rounds into one of the burrowing drones, though Keiji is nowhere to be seen. James confirms that he can't get in touch with the others either, and worse still, he and Keiji got separated a while back. After talking the matter over, the trio finally decide on a course of action. Anthony will escort James, who sustains some minor wounds, back to the observation platform while Samus goes alone to search for Keiji. With that, Samus sets off into the desert alone. From here, players are given free rein to explore the desert area, uncovering secrets and battling enemies. After a while, though, Samus manages to locate Keiji in one of the artificial canyons. Or what remains of him, anyway. Yeah, he's dead, slumped up against a rock wall. A few subtle clues in the area point to signs of a struggle, and Keiji's wounds are reminiscent to those found on the scientist's corpse back in the residential zone. Samus is once again reminded of Ian, as indicated by a very brief flash of her former navigator on the screen. Then, without a word, she turns around and tries to head back the way she came, knowing that more of her teammates are in danger. Unfortunately, several explosives suddenly detonate along the canyon wall, causing a rock slide. Samus manages to avoid being crushed, naturally, but the way back is now blocked off. Samus has no choice but to continue on to the tundra area and circle back around. The tundra area is fairly straightforward at first. Some more cloaked enemies, some more burrowers, hidden items beneath the snow and ice, and so on. I'm also imagining some chilly lakes or rivers here and there that damage players if they go in them. Samus's various suit can protect her from frigid temperatures to an extent, but it doesn't quite have the same level of insulation as the gravity suit. Wink wink. Finally, Samus comes across Lyle and Maurice resting near a makeshift campfire. After quickly catching up for a bit, Samus informs them of the current situation, as well as Keiji's fate. Lyle begins to suspect that James might be responsible, but Maurice proposes an alternative option: the Deleters. Lyle immediately laughs off the idea, dismissing the Deleters as nothing but a story to scare new recruits. Regardless, Samus inquires further on the matter, to which Maurice readily elaborates. He informs her that the Deleters are a group of special operatives working directly for the higher-ups of the Galactic Federation. Their identities are a closely guarded secret, and it's said that their primary role is cleaning up any messes their bosses don't want going public, destroying evidence, silencing witnesses, effectively deleting anyone or anything that could damage the Federation's reputation. Lyle intervenes and insists once again that the Deleters are all just some crazy conspiracy theory. They're just a myth, nothing more. Besides, they all have more important matters to tend to right now than stand around and tell spooky stories. Ultimately, the trio agrees to put this Deleter talk on hold, and focus on reuniting with the remaining members of the 7th Platoon. If it weren't obvious, the Deleters are not just a myth like Lyle insists. No doubt you've noticed the use of plurals thus far. Indeed, in this version of the story, Deleter isn't just a word Samus made up to describe one assassin, but a semi-official term for the Federation's own personal cleanup crew. Not that they'd ever be recognized as such, of course. So, what does that mean? Are there now multiple Deleters aboard the station? My answer to that is maybe. See, we've had Samus go up against pursuer-type enemies before. The SAX in Fusion and the Emmys in Dread. Both of these threats worked so well because Samus was effectively powerless against them for the majority of the game. These were unthinking, unfeeling killing machines who could shrug off most of her attacks and kill Samus almost instantly if she's discovered by them. The Deleters, however, are human. Doubtless, they're highly skilled and armed with some of the best equipment the Federation can offer, but still probably not a match for the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter on their own. I mean, seriously, the Deleter in the original game tried to kill Samus with a high-tech forklift. It went about as well as you'd expect. So, in this version, here's what we're gonna do. The Deleters are an active threat and menace throughout the story, but they operate primarily in the background. In addition to slowly killing off Adam's crew, the Deleters will constantly be putting obstacles in Samus's path, locking off parts of the station, unleashing hordes of enemies, jamming communications, and maybe even blowing up parts of the station later on as they take more extreme measures to kill Samus. Ultimately, what makes the Deleters intimidating this time around is simply the element of the unknown. At any given moment, you don't know where they are, what they're doing, or even how many of them there are. You could be going up against one Deleter or several, and it becomes increasingly apparent that they're monitoring every step you take throughout the station that they evidently have full control over. You're on their turf, and all you can do is weather the obstacles they set against you in pursuit of the truth. Yeah, I realize this probably wouldn't have quite the same impact as the SAX or the Emmys, but I'm not trying to go for the exact same thing here. After all, you can only do that kind of pursuer so many times before it starts to get a little stale. So I think we could benefit from shaking up the formula a bit. Maybe you could add an element of semi-randomness to the leader encounters. At any point, doors could lock or rooms could lose power or be flooded with enemies set loose by a deleter. Could that get annoying? Perhaps, but again, I'm just pitching ideas that might work better in concept than execution. Anyways, we'll discuss the deleters more as they become relevant in the story going forward. For now, back to the matter at hand. Samus and her companions near the exit of the Tundra area. All they have to do is cross a frozen lake. Unfortunately, things are never quite so simple. As they approach the center of the lake, the ice begins to break apart and another giant bug mass emerges. Immediately, something seems different. Lyle opens fire with a few ice shots, but the bug mass seems totally unaffected. Maurice reasons that this must be a subspecies that's adapted to the cold, effectively making the freeze guns useless. Thankfully, Samus still has alternative methods for dealing with the creature. She insists that Lyle and Maurice run ahead while she keeps the bug mass distracted, and despite Lyle's obvious reservations, they both comply. With that, players are left alone to deal with this cryo-bug swarm. Thankfully, the spark beam still proves effective at disrupting the control unit's signal, and I could even see maybe pulling the control unit out with the grapple beam being an option. Ultimately, though, Samus emerges triumphant, as you would expect. But her troubles are far from over. Samus reaches the observation deck, but finds that only Maurice and Lyle are there, implying that James and Anthony never made it back. Once more, suspicion is cast upon James, and Samus is prepared to venture back out into the jungle area to search for them. Before she can, however, everyone receives a sudden transmission from Adam, telling them to return to the command center. His voice is muffled and extremely staticky, but it sounds extremely urgent. Ultimately, despite their hesitations, the trio returns to the command console and reunites with Adam. The trio reports everything that happened in the testing grounds, and Samus asks for permission to go back and search for Anthony and James. Adam declines, however, saying that she'll be needed elsewhere. Some strange activity began in the laboratory shortly before communications cut out, and Adam reasons that this is most likely the reason why that happened in the first place. He tasks Samus with going there, investigating, and eliminating the source of the disturbance, if possible. And, of course, he ends with the infamous "Any objections, lady" line. At long last, Samus goes to the one area of the station that she has yet to visit, the laboratory. It's about what one would expect at a glance. Sterile, clean, and very eerie. There are no enemies here. At least, so it seems. Observant players will doubtless note how absent everything seems. All the monitors appear to be switched off, all the whiteboards are now blank, and there's not a log or record to be found. In short, for a laboratory, the place is notably lacking in any signs of research. This is especially curious given what the 7th Platoon reported finding on their own prior visit to the lab. Even more curious is how many doors appear to be locked or sealed off. But there's little that Samus can do but keep moving forward through the ones that aren't. Eventually, Samus will enter a large room filled with peculiar metal caskets. You can all probably guess where this is going, so let's cut to the chase. As Samus proceeds onwards, we cut to a scene of someone pressing buttons on a keyboard. Several of the caskets open, releasing biomechanical monstrosities into the room. What exactly they look like, well, I haven't come up with a solid design for them. The only important fact is that these things are fast and hit hard, making it quickly apparent that they're not jobber enemies. For that reason alone, let's give them the placeholder name of Raptors. Regardless, they're ultimately no match for Samus, and after dispatching her assailants, the bounty hunter moves to inspect the bodies. As she does, we get another very brief monologue. The creatures before me were grotesque, yet there was a sort of logic to their design. They weren't merely wild beasts that had been captured and augmented. No, it was as though every facet of their biology was made for combat. Quick, efficient, and ruthless. However, these creatures were far from the most dangerous adversary aboard the station. It was no accident they sprang at me when they did. Something far more deadly was lurking aboard the beta station, and it had no intention of letting me or my old team leave this place alive. Our only choice was to descend even deeper into the trap we'd obviously fallen into, in the hopes of uncovering the truth. And descend deeper we shall. Leaving the containment room behind her, Samus heads into a section of the lab that seems to be a little lacking in light. Odd, considering that she already restored power to the entire station. No time to dwell on that, though, because Samus will soon find herself dealing with more familiar enemies. The standard armored security drone she's dealt with thus far, as well as a couple of bug swarms here and there. Throughout the entire area, Samus will occasionally find the bodies of raptors littered about, though it's not exactly clear what killed them. She might also encounter one or two live ones as well. There's also plenty of damage to the machinery, some locked missile doors, and inactive generators for the players to bypass. Once you do, though, you'll eventually find your way into a room filled with raptor vats. But they're all broken, and the raptors inside them seem to be dead. Suddenly, something lunges down at Samus from above. She narrowly evades the attack, and the creature's appendages scrape her suit. Samus takes up a combat stance and finds herself face to face with another raptor. But this one is different. It seems bigger and more evolved than the others, and far deadlier. A collar around its neck indicates that this one had once been in captivity, but had since broken free. Or perhaps someone had let it free. Either way, Samus now has little choice but to take it down. This is our fourth boss of the game, which I am deciding to simply call the Apex. The Apex is fast, able to build up speed in mere seconds and barrel into Samus with murderous intent. Players will need sharp reflexes to evade this monster's attacks. But there's no real gimmick to this one, other than outmaneuvering and outsmarting the enemy. Consider it a test of the player's skills up to this point. Once the Apex is taken down, its corpse produces another peculiar object, which of course Samus absorbs. Congratulations, you've now acquired another familiar power-up, the Speed Booster! With this, Samus will be able to barrel through enemies, certain types of locked doors, and of course perform a Shine Spark. Now, admittedly, the Speed Booster is a power that feels more useful in 2D than 3D, but other M's still managed to make it work somewhat in the original game. So just imagine that the beta station has long, narrow strips and corridors that you can run through. Anyways, back to the story. An explosion rocks the laboratory, and shortly thereafter, Samus receives a call from Adam. It seems that communications have been re-established, but the team still can't get into contact with James or Anthony. What's more, the way back to the command terminal has been sealed off in that explosion, yet Adam seems uncertain as to what could have caused it. Regardless, Samus will have to keep going ahead and take a detour through the factory if she wants to make it back to Adam. Luckily, her new Speed Booster ability will make it that much easier. See, in typical Metroid fashion, I want all areas of the map to be interconnected. So far, players have had to return to the hub when going to a new area, but now that we've officially visited every main part of the station, it's time to start opening up some pathways. I'm imagining a bridge linking the factory with the lab, but it's been retracted. Thankfully, crossing the gap will be a cinch now that Samus has the Shine Spark, so players will be able to reach an area of the factory that they haven't been able to before. Not too much to say here, admittedly. Players will head through the yet unexplored lower regions of the factory, fighting enemies, solving puzzles, and platforming as they go. The key takeaway here is that those with a keen eye will notice some pretty significant details in the background. Spare parts and schematics displayed on monitors throughout the area. It definitely seems like something big was being built here. But what exactly that is, well, I'll leave to your imagination for now. Unfortunately, that's about all the time we have for this video, so please look forward to the next part in the relatively near future. Bye for now.